Ranking Member DeSaulniers of California. Your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the last comments, before the conference chair leaves, she's not listening. I'm happy to follow up in a dialogue. It's consistent with my opening statements. These hearings drive me crazy too. As a professional healthcare patient for the last 10 years and as a former small business owner, and we've had these conversations multiple times, the chair and I, this is something that just seems so obvious. And unfortunately, our current atmosphere in the Congress doesn't bode well that we will actually come to conclusions. I would say that waiting for the IG report would be very helpful. And hopefully the Inspector General will give us a real objective way that we can make this beleaguered agency work. Given that we have one investigator for every 17,500 plans. So, Mr. Khawar, give a moment here to talk about the cuts and efficiencies, and I would be interested in hearing from private employers, if you're not going to fund a program to make it efficient, why would you surprise it doesn't work well? So talk about the budget cuts, and then if you could talk about this, it was Brandeis who said sunshine is the best antidote, but how do we get to that point where it's efficient so everybody has it? This nefarious idea that somehow the employees are getting information, and as you said to Mr. Scott's comments, that's you're not history. That's not your history. You're trying to help with a settlement that is both efficient and is acceptable to both parties. So speak to both, cutting the budget, and then we added money in the No Surprise Act, so that helped the budget. Speak to the budget problems, but then this accusation from the majority that there are nefarious things going on that benefit the one side as opposed to working with both sides to a mutually agreed, acceptable settlement and conclusion.
Thank you. I will do my best in the remaining time to answer all of that. On the budget cuts, I mean, I think it is ironic to have a conversation about additional reporting at a time when the agency's personnel has been cut so much. And the budget cut is important to understand in the context of the personnel cuts that it creates. If the agency can only support 640 employees, all told, which is what the FY26 budget request is for. That is not just 640 investigators. That's the investigators, that's economists, that's reg writers, that's benefits advisors, that's also people that handle personnel, travel, those kinds of things. There's an accounting function. It is everything that the agency does in 640 people. And at its peak, the agency had close to 1,000. So it is, in that context, tiny for the obligations that it has, and that the timeliness problem is going to get worse. And I just wish the conversation we were having, it's not coming at a point where the agency has been given a fair chance to do everything that it can to close investigations in a timely manner, for example. Instead, it's been resource-starved. It's been trying to figure out how to make do with less and less and less. And one function is that investigations are going to take longer. That is going to be another consequence of the budget cuts. On this issue of the trust and the relationship between the agency and its various stakeholders, I mean, I have a few thoughts. First is, just as Mr. Golombek, observed in his opening statement, that he doesn't view the agency as playing the same role that it used to. I would say the same is true of the private defense bar in particular, which has become, over the years, far more antagonistic. Another cause of untimely investigations is that the private defense bar increasingly tells their clients that they shouldn't cooperate with EBSA, they shouldn't help us get to the bottom of it. What we really want to do is get in, get the documents, figure out the problem, fix it, move out. The agency's goal is to solve problems voluntarily. It's in no one's interest for the agency to start bringing lawsuits on everything. And what we want to try and do is have an efficient process that works for plan sponsors, works for the agency, but importantly also works for participants and makes sure that their rights are actually being realized.
Thank you. I yield back.
All right, the gentleman yields, and I think we have no more questions. I want to now recognize well, first I'll give my closing statement, and then, well, actually, the ranking member gives his closing statement. Would you like to close out your side? You did a good job on questions, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Collegiality. Maybe it'll come back, Mr. Banducci, and then you can come back as well. Well, I do appreciate that, and although we've had some serious disagreements, this is something I think it would really be constructive, Mr. Chairman, to have a conversation about. With the increase in denials that we had hearings about in this subcommittee over the last couple sessions, your predecessor, Mr. Good, who is no longer a member of Congress, we actually worked to try to make corrections in a bipartisan way. But it's so important. If people are going to be not be able to access Medicaid, and we have more denials in the employer-employee section, having been on the governing body of a public hospital, you know where people are going to end up. They're going to end up in the emergency room with critical care. So if we don't get this right, it affects the whole system. If you cut police, unfortunately, there are going to be people who do bad things. You've got to have the appropriate level of funding so that people like Mr. Khawar can work in good faith with both parties. So I would just say, Mr. Chairman, there's an opportunity here. I'm afraid that ethical behavior more and more in our culture, politically and business-wise, is making it harder for us to get people to do the right thing without regulators. And just consistently underfunding and demeaning public sector employees who are doing a good job doesn't help the situation. And from my perspective, as opposed to our conversations about our experience in the business sector, it's eroding the level of trust. And in this case, where you've got denials going up and the efficiency of the system unfortunately not working, it would be really a wonderful opportunity for us to work together to see if we could fix some of the challenges we have. And just defunding it and blaming the people who are left, I don't think speaks well to our institution as trying to engage in problem solving. Mr. Banducci, Mr. Khawar, I have the feeling in a former setting the two of you could go into a room and negotiate a lot of this for everybody's benefit, particularly all of the American taxpayers, consumers, and high road business owners, both public and private. So with that, Mr. Chairman, these bills don't solve the problem. I would argue that it would be better for us to take a deep breath, wait for the Inspector General's report, and engage in constructive, bipartisan, heavy work of legislating in good faith to see if we can fix the situation before we make it worse. And I will yield back.
Representative Mark DeSaulniers, Democrat, California, voiced his concerns about the budget cuts affecting the efficiency of the agency, particularly regarding its ability to resolve investigations in a timely manner. As a former small business owner and healthcare patient for the past decade, DeSaulniers expressed frustration over the inefficiency within the system, exacerbated by the lack of adequate resources. He pointed out that the agency had seen significant reductions in personnel, which created delays in processing and handling investigations. The current budget cuts had left the agency with only 640 total employees, compared to the nearly 1,000 employees it had at its peak, which includes not only investigators but also economists, benefits advisors, and other essential staff. He highlighted the fact that this personnel shortage was contributing to the agency's struggle to meet its obligations, especially given that it is tasked with overseeing thousands of plans with a severely understaffed team. With one investigator per 17,500 plans, the ability to provide adequate oversight was becoming increasingly difficult. DeSaulniers questioned how anyone could expect the agency to function effectively under such conditions. In his exchange with Ali Khawar, founder and president of FCP, LLC, DeSaulniers brought up the budget cuts specifically, asking how they impacted the agency's ability to remain effective. Khawar acknowledged that the cuts were a significant factor in the agency's struggle to perform its duties efficiently. He stressed that despite efforts to make do with less, the consequences were visible, with investigations taking longer and the agency's overall functionality hindered. DeSaulniers also addressed accusations regarding the agency's role, particularly those suggesting that the agency was benefiting one side over another in settlements. He countered this by emphasizing the agency's goal of resolving issues collaboratively and voluntarily, without resorting to litigation. He argued that this approach was in everyone's best interest, including plan sponsors and participants, and was far more efficient than engaging in lengthy legal battles. He emphasized that the agency's efforts should be viewed as part of a solution rather than a source of conflict. As the conversation progressed, DeSaulniers reiterated that for the agency to function properly, adequate funding was necessary. He expressed concern about the growing antagonism between the private defense bar and the agency, noting that many defense attorneys were advising their clients not to cooperate, which further prolonged investigations. He argued that the lack of collaboration made it harder for the agency to solve problems efficiently, delaying the resolution of issues that could have been addressed more quickly. The discussion ended with DeSaulniers calling for bipartisan efforts to address these issues. He acknowledged that ethical behavior and trust were central to overcoming the current inefficiencies, urging members of Congress to work together in a constructive and bipartisan manner. He recommended waiting for the Inspector General's report, which he believed could provide an objective and clear way forward to resolve the ongoing challenges. Ultimately, DeSaulniers' focus was on finding solutions that worked for everyone involved, plan sponsors, employees, and the agency, through fair funding and transparency. He warned that continuing to underfund public sector agencies and undermining their efforts would only make things worse, urging for a renewed focus on ethical behavior and collaboration.